Hello, and welcome to Jay Covers Comics, where today I'm going to be talking about a one-shot issue called Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe. Slightly weird to spoil the ending and the title of the comic, but at least we know what we're in for. Let's find out what has gotten good old Frankie's panties in a twist, enough for him to want all of our favourite heroes dead and buried. So we start off in Hell's Kitchen 10 years ago when some kids are chanting Daredevil, Daredevil, whilst pummeling little Matty Murdock into mashed potato. Out of nowhere, big Frank Castle comes by and stops the quarrelling, whacks this ginger bastard in the face, and forces all the other kids to run away. Frank comforts a beaten and bruised Matt by basically saying to him stop being a little pussy and hit them back, whether your dad wants you to or not. He calls his dad an idiot and then starts to walk away. We now cut back to modern day New York, where this seems to be a fight going on between aliens and robots. Just missing one, and then they're fighting all the big three. From this.
What big three? Androids, aliens, and wizards.
All units are being told to stay back and not engage. The fight is a major superhuman conflict and should not be intervened with. However, Frank doesn't give a fuck, and his squad mate tells him he's basically just nuts, and Frank says, they said the park, my wife took the kids to the park, and we kind of know where it's gonna go from here now, don't we? A news reporter states the fight is now over, but Frank seems to be slightly late to the party. He listens in on Daredevil scolding Cyclops and Captain America that their recklessness has hurt civilians, but Cap is a heartless bastard and states that there was no time to clear the area before throwing his shield at anything that moved. Oh, and Wolverine's taking a shit in this panel for some reason. Daredevil says that this woman and her children are now dead, but Cyclops is adamant that there was no way to avoid them. Unluckily for him, however, this is where Frank arrives. Cyclops tries to apologize, but Frank doesn't take it too well. He lets bullets fly, shooting Scott point blank in the middle of his visor, and then sprays towards the other heroes. Wolverine unsheathes his claws and lunges at him, slicing Frank across the neck and chest while screaming, "He killed them! Let me go! He killed her!" That's my Frank voice. Yep. Side note, what the fuck is Frank's body armor made out of that he can just tank a swipe of adamantium claws? They must be expensive. Our next scene now shows Frank awake and staring at Matt opposite, who introduces himself as Frank's attorney. Matt states that he's facing a long sentence, but due to the fact that his wife and kids just got lasered in half, and because of his exemplary military record, Matt hopes he can be dealt with fairly. Turns out though, killing Cyclops and Jubilee isn't the best way to relieve stress, and Frank is then sentenced to life in prison. Boo. But Frank isn't taken to Rikers or the Raft or some dirty underground that smells like piss and mud. He's taken to a pretty nice looking house on top of a mountain. Kesselring greets Frank out of the van and invites him up to his abode. Kesselring tells Frank that by all accounts he has indeed been taken to Rikers. The guards will attest to this and the computer documents will also say so. Frank of course steps out the van, but the only question on his mind right now is why? Kesselring turns his burnt and disheveled face away from Frank and states that Dr. Doom once threw the Human Torch at his car, and that explains why his face is so crispy. Frank is then introduced to a room of people that were once wronged and deeply affected by these so-called heroes. One was attacked by Wolverine in a case of mistaken identity, one had a building thrown at him by the Thing, and one was run over by Ghost Rider, and so on. Frank asks the one question that's been irking him since he stepped into this room. What the fuck why am I here? And he simply replies with, I want you to punish them. Kesselring attempts to justify his positions to Frank, but he doesn't respond with questions, he just has requirements. He needs equipment, funding, data, and time. Kesselring looks at Frank with one eye, the one he has left, and asks, will you do it? And he simply replies with, yeah, go on then. The next page brings us to Spider-Man and Venom battling in a poopy sewer. Spidey's senses start tingling, and he turns to Frank stood behind him, with the logo we've all come to respect on his oh my god, chest. Spidey tells Eddie that there's barbed tasers scattered across all directions within the sewer. Mr. Brock doesn't give a fuck, and then pushes the pair of them into the electrified wires. The symbiote doesn't fare too well against electricity, surprisingly, and Spidey takes a fall as well. Frank towers over a depowered Eddie Brock and dumps half a mag into his face. Spidey begs for him to stop and asks who is you? And Frank basically just replies with, I'm the Punisher. Peter of course asks why, what did he do to deserve this, and Frank holds the barrel towards the spider's head, pulling the trigger, and replies with, because somebody had to be first. So Frank's first kill was our favourite wall crawler. Well, technically it was Venom that he killed first, but Spidey's death really stuck out to me for some reason. Maybe it's because of the innocence that Pete usually displays, but the fact that Frank popped his pussy with seemingly zero remorse really sets the tone of how the rest of this comic is going to go. We jump into the van with Frank and Micro, who exchange meaningless small talk about the job that was just completed. Turns out though, Micro has lost both of his legs, and this is all because he wouldn't give Doc Ock the missile keys during his time back in the Air Force. The next panel takes us back into the streets of New York, where the Hulk is doing his usual business of smashing shit up. The Punisher, of course, knows that he's not able to take down the Green Giant, so his smart plan is to shoot a tracker between his juicy green buns and wait for Banner to make a reappearance. Frank tracks Banner down to a solemn alleyway where he's sleeping on a pile of trash, and before he has a chance to question what the fuck is going on, Frank fires a single shot into his cranium. We jump back into the van with Micro, where Frank asks if he's able to get him into Kingpin's building, where Micro just gives him a cheeky grin and says, well, yeah, of course I can. Who you talking to, bish? It's me, the Micro. The building has explosions erupting out from the sides. Frank is within, just emptying rounds into every man that gets close to him. Kingpin isn't scared though, he's waiting, expecting him, maybe. Frank smashes through the door and Fisk grabs a hold of his M4, bending it like it's made of rubber. Fisk explains to Frank that he's been stockpiling weaponry for his use, wanting to aid Frank in his task to take down the superpowered beings. Frank has however taken down his entire empire. The bank accounts are drained, his crew is dead, and now Wilson's patience is incredibly thin. It's now his turn to take it all away from the Punisher. Frank takes 2 pistols out of his back holsters and lays hell into the Kingpin. Due to the absolute sheer size of the man, round after round he keeps on standing. Despite a shot in the eye and multiple in the chest, Fisk gets on top of Frank with a hand around his throat, but Frank brings his pistol up to Fisk's. The police break into the room mere seconds after the Punisher does what he does best, and witness a deceased Wilson Fisk on top of Frank. We once again find Mr. Castle with his blind attorney, who is apparently pretty shit at his job because Frank is once again sentenced to life in prison. But of course, with the power of comic writing, Frank is once again busted out. The Fantastic Four are seen flying through Latvian airspace in this, and Frank isn't too far behind in his chopper. Very soon after, drops in with a parachute. Smash cut and Doom is beating the absolute shit out of Frank. He's breaking ribs, kicking the wind out of him and choking him lightly like a good daddy Doom. Doom is shouting the usual old English insults, and Frank eventually grows tired of being battered. He brings out a small silver disc and plonks it right in the middle of his head. The disc explodes on his face and takes out all of the surrounding Doombots. Victor is stunned, but not yet out. Frank knows that a tiny boom isn't enough to take him out, so he grabs a hammer from a wall display. The next panel honestly made me fucking laugh out loud. It seemingly takes 5 clangs to get to Doom's mask before you're able to turn his face into a squitch. Frank and Micro walk into Doom's war room and are surrounded by microwave guns, spaceships, and all different ways to kill a man. Frank walks past all of this and has eyes for only one thing. The pair come to the end of the room and stares at the nuke waiting for them. Frank gives Micro a glance and states it's time to get sneaky. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which is a fucking ridiculous name by the way, Apocalypse, and basically every other naughty boy you can name have all met up with all the hero mutants we have come to love. On the moon. They have met up on the moon. Magneto calls Storm a silly bitch for inviting everyone to the moon to just die, and then Storm is like, what the fuck are you talking about, bitch? You invited us here. Obviously Frank has set them all up. He's also set up a big fat nuke to land as soon as the confusion sets in, killing everybody that's come to battle. There's only one mutant left though, the small, scary Canadian that's already left Frank with a nasty scar. Wolverine has a little drunken monologue and gives us some extra story bits. He is of course sad that all of his mates are dead, but he also says that the Avengers got fried in a teleporter accident, Mr. Fantastic was found dead in a dumpster, and Cap is apparently investigating what's going on. From the depths of the alleyway, Frank comes along and says, "You're breaking my heart." Wolverine briefly turns before Frank explains that it was him that sent all of his friends to the moon, and it was of course him that sent Logan on a wild goose chase across Japan to make sure Frank could save him until last. Logan isn't best pleased by the look on his face. What the fuck is this? He releases his claws and lunges at the Punisher, but Frank is somehow quicker and is able to lodge a bottle into his neck. Frank kicks him in his little nuggies and then issues a boot to the face. As we all know though, it's damn difficult to take down the Wolverine. Logan swipes at Frank's chest, but somehow his body armor takes the majority of the damage. Frank is knocked to the ground. Logan jumps to get him, but he's kicked backwards into a fenced door. Frankie pulls out his gun, but before he's able to use it, Logan stabs him right in the hand. Logan exclaims to Frank that all of his friends are dead and that's all his fault, and Frank fires back with how all of his family are dead, and all he got was a sorry. Frank outstrengths the Canadian, and Logan has the same face I did when I saw that this was even fucking possible for what is realistically just a normal angry man. Frank is able to stab Logan with his own claws and then throws him into an electrical generator. Frank stands back and watches as the voltage melts through Logan's skin all the way through the adamantium and fries his brain to nothing. I mean, we know that Logan can realistically come back from anything, but let's just let the comic do what it wants to do. You know what I mean? We're now back with Kesseling and his disfigured friend, who explains that within 3 short years, the Punisher has managed to take down nearly 500 superhumans. There's a quick double-page spread that highlights some of the powers that Frank has taken down, like how the fuck did he take down Ghost Rider, like a bucket of water or something. Anyways, Frank is locked up once again. Matt is basically telling him to stop being a dick and killing people, but Frank is just like, no. The next page has the Punisher up against Captain America. Frank has now ran out of bullets and Cap just starts wailing the shit out of him. Cap towers over Frank and asks what happened. You used to be a soldier, now you're just a disgrace. Frank exclaims to Cap that he's not a true soldier. As if he were, he'd know how to scope out the battlefield, just like he did when he stashed this pistol. Frank cocks the gun, pulls the trigger, and eliminates the first Avenger. Frank is called to Kesseling's mansion to celebrate. However, the Punisher doesn't appreciate the gesture. Frank says that there's nothing to celebrate, he just does it. There's only one target left. Daredevil. He's taking him out tonight and then he's out. He's never coming back. Kesseling orders him to stop and shout that he is giving his life meaning. Freed him from jail. How dare he just leave? He works for me. Frank basically scoffs and states that he does what he does and he does it for himself. Kesseling thinks that putting a gun on the fellow who was just taking down the Hulk is a good idea and is adamant that Frank is going nowhere and he's going to be his personal killing machine. Frank turns back with his own gun drawn and just shoots him. He tells Kesseling's little gremlins that if anyone tries to contact him again, he's coming back to kill them all. Frank has now traveled all the way back to Hell's Kitchen, ready to enact his final kill. Daredevil greets him and welcomes him home. The pair are seemingly having a normal conversation before Frank goes full auto and somehow misses every shot. Daredevil's hand-to-hand is just too much for Frank, and Red swings Frank's jaw to another country. Frank is kicked into the water and Daredevil begs for him to give up. Of course though, the Punisher is relentless and continues to run at the devil despite getting battered. Frank is knocked down and Double D explains that everyone's dead, some bad, but many, many good. Frank reacts and states that he's just killed a bunch of arrogant scum, but Daredevil once again begs for this to end and holds out his hand. Frank accepts it, holds his wrist, and then plunges a knife into the chest of Daredevil. Daredevil falls onto his back, unmasks himself, and stares back at Frank. The Punisher's battered face is still able to make out his childhood friend, his attorney, his final target. Matt's final words are, "There's always someone beneath the mask, but you killed us all." Frank looks down, sweating, bleeding, and exhausted, and then Frank just replies with, "No, Matt, there's one more to go." And that's where the comic ends, on a lovely high note. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you think that this was just fucking utterly ridiculous? Would Frank have half a chance to kill any of the 500 people he took down? Obviously this one is a bit far-fetched. I know it, you know it, we all fucking know it, but it's still a pretty fun read. If you like this comic rundown, please subscribe, please like the video. Let me know in the comments if you want me to cover anything in particular. So thank you and goodbye.